Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to practice choosing a method in our factoring. This video goes with Mixed Factoring Review Worksheet, if you have that in front of you. The important part in choosing a method is deciding what do I have in front of me and what can I use to factor it. So you want to decide what kind of polynomial do you have. Do you have a binomial, trinomial, or a polynomial? And at that, break off from that knowing what do I have and what can I use. So if you have a binomial, bi meaning two terms, you're going to decide do I have the difference of squares or not. Remembering that difference of squares means you have a minus sign, you have even exponents, and then you have perfect squares for your coefficients. Perfect squares being your numbers that were a whole number squared to get to that. So your 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, etc. Okay, if you do have that, you can go ahead and use your special case strategy. If not, you're just going to fall back onto the GCF. The GCF strategy is always your fallback. Next, if you have a trinomial, meaning you have three terms, okay, you can first decide, do I have a quadratic or not? Does it have an x squared as its highest degree? And if it is a quadratic, you're going to move forward using that box method, undoing the multiplication. If not, you're just going to stick with the GCF and go forward with that method. The last kind of polynomial you might have is just the polynomial in general. Poly meaning multi or multiple. It's a little different there because in a polynomial you're just going to start with that GCF right away. Okay? If there is a GCF, you stick with it and go through with it. If there's not a GCF, you're going to go back and you're going to factor by grouping, which is just looking at things specifically. So we're going to look at 4 problems from your assignment tonight. Help give a better understanding of how to do this. So the first one we're going to do is number 12. If I notice number 12, I notice that it has 3 terms, so I go back and that means it's a trinomial. I also look at number 12 and I need to decide is it a quadratic or not. It is a quadratic because the highest term is x squared. So that means I can use the box method. If we can get back to number 12. There we go. So we're going to set up that box. Maybe that mystery box. Okay. In the top corner, we're going to put the first term, the 3x squared, and in the bottom corner, we put the last term, the negative 20. Now, our goal is to come up with things on the outside that multiply to the inside. Remember, sometimes we use that box method for multiplication. We're just undoing that now. Okay, so right here, I need 2 things that multiply to 3x squared. I know 3 and 1 will give me the 3, and then x and x will give me the x squared. Down here, I need 2 things that multiply to negative 20. I know that negative 5 and positive 4 will give me that negative 20. Okay. Now you're going to move forward and you're going to fill in those middle boxes. So I have a 3x times a negative 5 gives me a negative 15x. And a 4x times a 1x gives me a 4x. Now you need to check if these middle 2 boxes add up to this middle term. That's your goal. They want to add to the middle term. I have 4x and a negative 15x. Those do give me a negative 11. So I am done. If they did not add up to the middle term, you need to try other things on the outside. Trial and error. Switch it up and try something new. Okay, so my answer sits right here on the outside. My first factor is x minus 5. The 1 is not necessary. My second factor is 3x plus 4 because that 4 is positive. And you've factored your first trinomial. If you'd like to practice that, I suggest you find some more trinomial quadratics on your worksheet and you can practice that strategy for a little bit. If not, we're going to move back up to number 6, 3x squared plus 81. We're going to notice that this is a binomial, so we look at our chart. Binomial, we need to decide, is this the difference of 2 squares or not? Does it have a minus sign? Right there, we're done. It doesn't have a minus sign, so it's other. We're moving to this strategy to the GCF. Okay, GCF means we just use our factor tree. So I have 3 and then 2 x's. 81 gives me 9 and 9, 3, 3, 3, 3. Now you're going to look for now you're going to look for things that you share in common. Okay? You see that they both have a 3, so you cross it off in both, write it down once. You notice that there's nothing else in common, so you're going to put what's left in your parentheses. The first term, I have 2 x's left. When I move on to that second term, I'm going to put a plus sign, signifying that I'm going on to the next term. I have a 3, a 3, and a 3. To simplify that, you just multiply your things together. So 3 parentheses x squared plus 27. Okay? That's just simply using the GCF if there's no other strategy to use. If you want to practice that, you practice a little more and look for those problems on your paper. Next number we're going to look at is number 18. We notice that number 18 is a polynomial. So if we go back to our slide that gave us our flow chart here, polynomial, we're just going to start right away with that GCF. Okay? You don't have to determine anything in the beginning with polynomials. You just start with the GCF. Okay? So I'm going to break this down. I have a 2. That's a 3. I have a 2 and 3 x's. Then I break down my negative 3. The only negative number you can have is negative 1. So I do negative 1 and 3, and I have 2 x's. My 4 gives me 2 and 2 with 1 x. This negative 6 gives me a 2 and a negative 3. Again, the only negative number I can have is negative 1. So I'm going to break that negative 3 down into negative 1 and 3. Now I look across the board, and I need to look for something all 4 terms have in common. All of them have to have it. Okay? There's nothing that all 4 of them have it. So I go back to that flow chart. So I've done the GCF, and if they have no GCF, then we want to move to factor by grouping. Okay, so all that means is you're going to group your first 2 things together and just look at those. So if I just look at this front section, I'm looking for what do these 2 terms have in common? Well, they each have an x. I cross it off twice, write it down once. They have another x. I cross it off twice, write it down once. Then I don't see anything else. So I put what remains in the parentheses, 2 and an x. I'm moving on to the next term, so I use a plus sign, a negative 1, and a 3. Okay, simplify this a little. I get x squared in front, 2x, and negative 1 times 3 gives me a negative 3 in the back. Now I'm going to look at my back 2 terms, and I'm going to factor those. Look for what do these share in common. Okay, I notice that these both have a 2. I cross it off in both, write it down once. And I think that's all they share in common. So I start my parenthesis. The first term has a 2 and an x left. I'm moving on to the next term, so I use a plus sign. This one has a negative 1 and a 3. Simplify that up. I get 2x squared. Multiply the negative 1 and 3 together to give me negative 3. Now if I look at my 2 factors from the front and the back, I notice that they share something in common. They both share this 2x minus 3. So I'm going to pull that out front and start a parenthesis for what's remaining. What's remaining? X squared in the first one. I'm moving on to the next one, so I use a plus sign and then a 2. And this is your factored form. Okay? If you want to practice factor by grouping a little more, you can pause the video and try to find other polynomials that you can use factor by grouping on. The last example we're going to do today is number 17. So number 17, I look at it and I see that it's a binomial, so I'm going back to my chart. Binomial means I need to decide, is it the difference of 2 squares? Do I have a minus sign? Yes. Is my exponent even? Yes. That squared of that 2 is even. Do I have perfect squares? Yes. 16 is a perfect square, that's 4 times 4, and 81 is a perfect square because that's 9 times 9. So I'm going to use the special case method. Special case means I just break down my 16 into what were the squares that multiplied to it, 4 and 4, and then I have x and x. I break down my 81 into 9 and 9. My first parenthesis is 4x and a 9. My second parenthesis is 4x and a 9. Okay. Both parentheses need to look the same except for one has a plus sign, one has a minus sign. These numbers came from breaking it down into their perfect squares. If you don't like the special case method, you can use a different method. You can notice that this is a quadratic because of this x squared. You can add in what's missing. It's missing a plus 0x. And now that it's a trinomial quadratic, because what if you've transformed it to be, you can use the box method. In the box method, again, we put that first term in the top corner, that last term in the bottom corner, and now you're going to start to fill out the outsides to multiply to the insides. I need two things here that multiply to 16x squared. I know that 4 and 4 will give me the 16, and x will give me the x squared. Down here, I need two things that multiply to negative 81. I know 9 and negative 9 multiply to negative 81. I fill in the middle boxes to check. I have 4x times negative 9 gives me a negative 36x, and 4x times positive 9 gives me a positive 36x. I need to check that these middle two boxes add to the middle term that we created of 0, and they do. So my first factor is on top, 4x minus 9. My second factor is down this side, 4x plus 9. Same answer, either way, you choose the method. Okay? Good luck with your assignment tonight.